Hello, everyone. My name is Catherine. I'm the reference and instruction librarian for the Levy Library.
And hi, my name is Gloria Wilson. I'm the Director of Education and Research Services for the Levy Library.
And we'd like to welcome you all to today's open workshop on how to guide students in the use of ChatGPT for research. This course is one of 7 courses in a series. The series is based on the foundations of ChatGPT, and the additional 6 courses are foundational courses on various topics. The 3 you see in pink are geared towards everyone, while those in blue are geared towards educators and mentors, like the one you are in right now. Our learning objectives for today are as follows. We will identify how ChatGPT can be effectively and ethically used in stages of the research lifecycle. We will understand copyright implications of using ChatGPT. And lastly, we will describe considerations in using, validating, and documenting ChatGPT as a support for literature reviews. Going straight into the content, we understand that conducting research can be quite the hefty process, especially for students. And certain AI tools like ChatGPT can help them streamline aspects of the research lifecycle. ChatGPT can be particularly useful for planning phases, which include, for example, research question development, outlining your methods, and conducting a preliminary literature search. But it can also help streamline other aspects of the research lifecycle following the planning phases, such as data analysis and transcription. Now, while we won't be discussing the use of ChatGPT for data synthesis, we want you to be aware that there are people out there who have been talking about the potential capabilities of using AI for understanding, conducting, and organizing data synthesis. What you see in front of you is one such resource created by Razia Aliani, who is a researcher specializing in epidemiology and systematic reviews. She developed this infographic to serve as a guide on the different ways you can prompt AI to perform various tasks on data analysis. One of the reasons why we won't be talking about data analysis in this workshop is because we in the library are not data experts, but also we already have a workshop that focuses on the potential uses of ChatGPT for data analysis and visualization. So if you would like a deeper dive into how you can use ChatGPT for analyzing data or for just visualizing your work, we recommend checking out this workshop. Okay, so if we sort of make this more specific to students, in many ways, AI can act as like a research coach for students, guiding them on how to navigate through the research lifecycle and improving their skills, including helping them develop techniques for formulating research questions, understanding concepts, topics, or ideas, providing feedback on their work, and providing future directions or suggestions. What you see in front of you are examples of such cases. So these are just example prompts. If we look at the first 2 examples, our first example says, in lab today, a colleague suggested we might collaborate on an experiment using technique X. I nodded, but I'm not very familiar with this. Could you provide examples of the strengths and limitations of this technique? So this is an example of prompting ChatGPT in a way to educate yourself on a topic. In this case, we are trying to learn more about a particular technique, the way it is performed, and the pros and cons. Our second example says, I would like to practice my lab meeting presentation. Please provide me with feedback on tone, clarity, and if it is tailored to an audience of basic scientists rather than clinicians or computer programmers. This is a very straightforward example of using ChatGPT to provide feedback on your work, in this case, for a presentation. Now, while ChatGPT can act as like a research coach to students, it can also act as like a research assistant. Now, theoretically, students themselves do not have research assistants, but if we want to reframe this concept to students specifically, ChatGPT can serve as like a personal assistant to students by assisting them in performing various tasks of their research. So, for example, outlining and drafting, supporting data extraction and analysis, literature searching, or summarizing large bodies of text. While AI tools can serve as like assistants and coaches again to students, it is always a good idea for you, the educator or mentor, to overall guide students and provide human oversight to ensure that the AI tools they are using is providing adequate coaching and assistance to students, especially if they've never done research before. Because students are not experts in this area and they are still honing their skills, they need someone who is an expert to help them evaluate the information that they are getting from these tools. If we move on now to documenting acceptable use of ChatGPT in research, as part of the growing calls and interest from educators on how to talk to students about using AI in their work, we developed a learner's agreement for using AI in thesis proposals. This was created for faculty supervising thesis creation to be able to talk to students who are working on their thesis about the use of AI and to start the conversation about the role of AI in academic integrity. While we understand that this document does say thesis proposal, what is in the document is applicable to other situations outside of the student-professor relationship, and you can amend this document to fit your needs or create your own. One of the things that is discussed in this document is intellectual property and privacy laws. Essentially, it's not a good idea to upload original works that you may copyright later on into ChatGPT because it is constantly using what people put into it to further train the model. So it's going to be difficult for students to be able to preserve their work. The learner's agreement also covers publishing restrictions. Work produced by AI is not copyrightable, and we will talk a little bit more about this in the next slide. But in short, if it's used as an assistant or used to tweak information, then it is copyrightable. Something to also note is that journals have their own guidelines for the use of AI in published works. Some journals may not allow the use of AI and others do, but with restrictions. So if we look at the journal Science, for example, their policy states that AI is not considered an author or even a co-author. Authors should avoid submitting manuscripts where the work, including text, was solely generated by AI. And if AI was used to assist, this must be noted in the cover letter and acknowledgements. Authors should also provide detailed information on not only the AI tool that was used, but also the prompt that was used as well. Other journals have been coming out with similar policies requiring authors to be transparent about the use of AI in their work and dismissing the idea of ChatGPT as an author on a publication. Now, I mentioned in the last slide briefly about copyright. So if we look into this in a little bit more detail, just a little bit more deeply, the US Copyright Office came out with a report in January of 2025 with guidance on what is copyrightable versus what isn't copyrightable when using AI. Authors can claim copyright on images, text, audio, video, or a combination of these mediums where AI was used to modify or translate an original input. If I, for example, draw something on a piece of paper and feed it to DALL-E, for example, which is an image generator tool from OpenAI, to, let's say, bring that image to life, I can claim copyright because the image that I created was created by me. I drew that image before sort of inputting that into the AI tool. Authors can also claim copyright on AI-generated outputs that was modified or changed by the author. So if we use images again as an example, if I prompt again DALL-E to create an image of a beautiful landscape with a hot air balloon in the background, and I take that image and modify it myself, this is considered copyrightable because I personally changed that output. Something to note, though, is that it must meet the minimum standard of originality under the Feist court ruling. And if you're not familiar with this court ruling, essentially there were three things that were established. One, facts are not copyrightable. 2, compiled information requires some originality in how it is arranged, coordinated, and selected. And then number 3, putting a lot of effort into something doesn't make it copyrightable. Lastly, here, an author can also claim copyright on work where AI was used to assist in idea building, outlining, and modifying. Now, if we talk about works where authors can claim copyright, we should also discuss what authors cannot claim copyright on. Authors cannot claim copyright on work where prompt alone was used to generate an output. The US Copyright Office has cited a few reasons as to why this is, with the primary being lack of control. So according to them, prompts are instructions for unpredictable outputs. Even if someone creates a highly detailed prompt, they still don't have control over the output. And that's because there is this shared understanding that when someone is developing something, that there's this thought process of why and how it is being created. However, AI is unable to do this. It's just being told what to do without a particular reason as to why or really the thought process behind it. Another aspect to this as well is that AI is essentially filling the gaps where instructions aren't really provided. So again, using images as an example, if I prompt DALL-E again to create an image of a cat lying down on a couch, the remaining is going to be up to that tool to fill in. So if let's say I didn't specify the breed or color of the cat, it's up to the AI tool to figure it out on its own. Moving over into plagiarism, if we talk about copyright, we also have to talk about plagiarism. We do have Authenticate in the library, which students also have access to. If you're not familiar with Authenticate, it's a tool that assesses the originality of published work. Recently, Authenticate came out with an AI similarity report where it will give you a breakdown of text that may have been generated by AI or maybe even paraphrased by AI. This feature is not perfect. It can mistake original text as AI generated and vice versa. However, the goal here is not to demonize students for using AI, but rather to start a conversation on academic integrity where AI falls into that space and best practices. It does require more than 20% similarity to be considered plagiarism, and the focus here is on published papers, not so much for class assignments, although we have seen it be used for class assignments as well. The fact that we've talked a little bit about plagiarism, I think this is a good segue into sort of back into the learners agreement, which covers rigor and reproducibility. Just like with any other work, students must validate all citations provided by an AI tool. And similar to literature searches, you want to make sure that students are documenting and tracking the tools that they're using, as well as the prompts that they're using as well. Because I mentioned citations, we should also address citing AI tools. It is still unclear as to whether AI tools should be cited and when. So for example, there still isn't any type of guidance on what to do if you use ChatGPT to paraphrase, for example. Do you need to, in addition to cite the author, also have to cite the tool that you use to paraphrase? Like that's still unclear. However, organizations responsible for citation styles like APA, AMA, et cetera, have been coming out with their own guidance on how to cite an AI tool. AI shouldn't be the only place that students get their information. They should also conduct a proper search of the literature to find additional information. Because I mentioned searching the literature, now we can move on to how you can use ChatGPT for searching and reviewing the literature.
So in this section of the presentation, we will discuss how ChatGPT can be used for a literature review assignment. There are a few approaches to how to run this task of a literature review and how it can be done. One way is to provide ChatGPT with your research question and then prompt it to generate a literature review with cited references. That's a pretty easy way. That may take several minutes to process depending on how much information ChatGPT is mining. Yet another way is to use GPT as an assistant with the process of finding information. ChatGPT can be helpful when prompted to provide search strategies to find the literature. It can also be helpful with identifying concepts and themes. It can suggest literature databases. It can also generate a list of synonyms and keywords to search with, and ultimately develop a search strategy with all identified concepts and keywords using Boolean operators. So in our scenario, we prompted ChatGPT to develop a literature search strategy on the effectiveness of a vegetarian diet on reducing the risk of heart disease. ChatGPT was able to define concepts and provide keywords and synonyms, recommend databases, and developed example search strategies. For this process, we use the following prompt that's featured in the black box. It says, develop a literature search strategy for the following research question. Is a vegetarian diet effective at reducing the risk of heart disease? It was able to define the main concepts of the research question, as noted in the gray box, and for each concept provided a listing of keywords, phrases, and synonyms. It was also able to break down the research question using the PICO framework. PICO is often the framework that's used for health research. ChatGPT was also able to provide a listing of databases to search for the relevant literature, and even advises to search multiple databases to ensure broad coverage of the literature. When we usually prompt ChatGPT, we're typically using a natural language query. However, for many of the literature databases we use, Boolean searching is still the process on how to effectively retrieve the literature. So ChatGPT had suggested 2 example search strings. The first search string has a few more keywords than the second. Either approach is appropriate to run a search in the literature databases. Now for this exercise, I took the second search string ChatGPT suggested and executed it using the PubMed database by simply copying and pasting it into the PubMed search field. If you had asked ChatGPT to develop a PubMed search and include PubMed's medical subject headings, or as they're called, mesh terms sometimes, then you would have to validate the search and make sure it did not provide fake or erroneous medical subject headings. So to check the second search string that it provided me, I went off ChatGPT and executed the search in PubMed. I then selected a few references from the results and exported a list of references in a text file. Then I returned back to ChatGPT and uploaded the text file as a follow-up prompt, then asked it to synthesize the information in the file into a 400-word introduction and include in-text citations for my paper. The screenshot on the right displays the synthesis and key findings from the references and included citations. It's always a good idea to check and evaluate the AI-generated output. In this case, checking the search strategy and verifying the citations it also refers to, and that ChatGPT is accurately and factually synthesizing the information and not representing any of the findings. It also recommended to document your process with ChatGPT and making sure you save your transcript if questions ever arise about the process. There are certainly limitations to using ChatGPT for literature reviews. It does have the potential to make things up, such as fake medical subject headings or fake citations. There are tools that may be better with providing factual citations, such as Cite AI, Consensus, and Elicit. Another limitation is interpretability. ChatGPT may generate misleading or inaccurate summaries or misrepresent the findings of an information source. A third limitation is reproducibility. So it's very important to document your process when using any AI tool. ChatGPT is incapable of reproducing the same information with accuracy and consistency. So remember to download your transcript or take screenshots of the prompting and engagement you are having with ChatGPT. This was also mentioned in the faculty learner agreement Catherine mentioned before. See also the Levy Library's AI guide to find suggested ways to cite the use of Mount Sinai's chatgpt.edu tool for your work. So here are some key takeaways from this session. AI can support researchers in exploring ideas and learning about new methods and approaches when used responsibly. Mentors play a vital role in discussions with learners about when and how to use AI responsibly and ethically. It's also important to examine and document guidelines on the use of AI and to what extent the tools can be used in each instance. Definitely look into the terms of use, how the data is trained, and any privacy and how they manage privacy concerns. Examining guidance and documenting can help understand how AI was used, prompt alternative approaches, and capture your research process. Thank you. If you have any questions, please connect with us at the library at refdesk@mssm.edu.